In other world news, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Paris today and having dinner with President Emmanuel Macron at the Elysee Palace. Netanyahu has said their talks will focus on Iran and its nuclear program, but his visit is being overshadowed by the surge of violence in the occupied Palestinian territories and in Israel. Pro-Palestinian activists are planning a demonstration in the French capital on Saturday. Well, to talk a bit more about the context of Netanyahu's visit, I'm very pleased now to be joined on the programme by Khaled Elgindy. He's the director of the Palestinian-Israeli Affairs programme at the Mideast Institute. Thanks very much indeed for your time today on France 24.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, we know that Iran supplies drones to Russia that have been used in Ukraine. So is Netanyahu hoping this will sort of help consolidate an anti-Iran alliance in the West and that Israel would be included in that?
Yes, I think Iran is probably going to be at the top of Netanyahu's agenda in Paris and in all of his diplomatic engagements. It's the number one threat that Israel sees in the region. And on the other hand, I think the Palestinian issue is probably something he would rather have most of the world not talk about.
Indeed, and I wonder whether behind closed doors you think Emmanuel Macron is pushing Benjamin Netanyahu on what is happening in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territories. There's a new, very far-right security minister in Israel, for example. Lots of his language has been very heavily criticised in the past few days, but you know, when Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, visited the region just a few days ago, we didn't hear overt criticism of that, for example. So I wonder how much influence you think these Western leaders have over the Israeli government and over Netanyahu tonight.
Well, obviously they have influence. Maybe France doesn't have as much influence as the United States does, but they all have influence and they all have shared interests, enormous trade between them. France has a history of involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian issue in ways that the Israelis probably are not pleased with. So it's highly likely that I think Macron would raise the Palestinian issue, particularly given the ongoing violence, and urging Netanyahu to try and constrain things from the Israeli side. The difficulty, of course, is you mentioned this extremist government. You have an Israeli security minister who is not only accused of saying terrible things, he's actually been convicted in Israeli courts for racist incitement and support for terrorist groups. So this is an extremely far-right government that is bent on inflammatory and provocative actions toward the Palestinians.
And there has been a good degree of escalation in the past couple of days. There were rockets fired out of Gaza. There was an Israeli response this morning. Do you fear more escalation now?
Yes, I think everything right now is on a knife's edge. Any single attack or act can trigger a wider escalation. We've seen that happen in the past, in the not too distant past, in 2021, and even in August of 2022. Events can spill over from Jerusalem to Gaza and the West Bank quite easily. The problem is there is no real international effort to try and diffuse the situation. There is no diplomatic effort. There is no political process that people can refer to, and so people end up just making these rhetorical appeals for calm, when the reality on the ground is you have a massive asymmetry in power between Israel as the occupying force and Palestinians, who, of course, are much weaker.
Well, at least Macron is meeting tonight with Benjamin Netanyahu. You may have heard me say earlier on that there will be protests this weekend by Palestinian activists here who say Netanyahu shouldn't be travelling when the region is so volatile. I wonder, though, whether you think leaders like Macron should be reaching out to the Palestinian leadership. I mean, should we be seeing Mahmoud Abbas in Paris, for example?
Well, that's one option. I'm sure President Abbas would appreciate the gesture, as right now he is looking quite weak and irrelevant. I think that sort of an invitation would be mostly symbolic, because President Abbas is not really in control of events on the ground, whether it's armed groups in the northern West Bank or events in Jerusalem. And these are areas where his Palestinian Authority really doesn't have much control. So I think it would be a mostly symbolic gesture as a way to boost a kind of weak and flagging Palestinian leadership.
You think then the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is irrelevant right now when it comes to any possible negotiations?
Well, not necessarily in terms of negotiations. I mean, I don't see any possibility of negotiations with this Israeli government in place. But he's irrelevant in terms of events on the ground, in terms of the violence, where he simply can't. He's not in control of areas where the violence is happening.
Khaled Elgindy, it's good to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.